Now let's do the news. Ghana's coronavirus cases currently stand at 4,700 with 494 recoveries and 22 fatalities. Now this was announced by President Akufo-Addo in his latest televised address on Ghana's situation on Sunday evening. He also reiterated that government is on course to ensure that the virus is contained and urged the public to adhere to safety protocols to halt spread.
As of Wednesday, 6th May, a total of 135,902 tests had been conducted, with our country's total number of confirmed cases standing at the time at 3,091, with 303 recoveries and, sadly, 18 deaths. On Thursday, 7th May, 14,046 more tests were conducted, and this included the clearing of the last set of backlogs. Our total confirmed cases then rose to 4,012 positives, i.e. 921 new cases. Our recoveries stood at 323, 8 persons were critically ill, and deaths still at 18. It is important to stress that 533 out of the 921 new cases recorded between last Wednesday and Thursday are factory workers from a fish processing factory located in Tema. All 533 persons were infected by one person. Again, let me reiterate that these new 921 cases were from backlogs dating as far back as 26th April and not necessarily over a 24-hour window. The coming on stream of 7 more testing facilities across the country to complement the efforts of the Noguchi Research Institute, the Kumasi Center for Collaborative Research, and the National Public Health Reference Laboratory at the Korle Bu Teaching Hospital have meant that we have been able to clear all the backlog of tests, and the reporting on the cases of infections since Friday, 8th May, is now current. On Friday, a total of 5,253 tests were conducted, with 251 positives. On Saturday, 2,255 tests were conducted, with 266 found to be positive. For today, Sunday, a total of 3,045 tests have been done, with 160 testing positive. These relatively lower daily numbers of infections are welcome and reinforces the fact that the measures instituted to help reduce person-to-person contact and help defeat the pandemic are working. So as of today, Sunday, 10th May, the country has conducted a total of 160,501 tests, with our total number of infections standing at 4,700, with 494 recoveries, 5 persons being critically ill, and 4,179 persons responding to treatment. 22 persons, virtually all of them with underlying illnesses such as hypertension, diabetes, and chronic liver disease, have unhappily died. We must understand that the more people we test for the virus, the more persons we will discover as positive, and thus have the opportunity to isolate and treat them. If you do not test people for the virus, you will not find the persons who are positive, let alone isolate them from the population and treat them and prevent them from spreading the virus.
We'll take you to the Ashanti region, where residents of Fomena have given government a 3-month ultimatum to complete an abandoned hospital project as contractors return to sites. work on the 120-bed capacity facility stalled back in 2017, prompting consistent calls by residents and other groups for government to take an action. The government subsequently has directed resumption of work, but youth are doubtful about the commitment, indicating they will mount pressure on authorities to ensure a speedy completion of the project.
The Fomena Hospital project on a 35-acre plot of land is one of 6 district hospitals started under the Mahama-led administration at a cost of $175 million. The current government, however, alleges breaches in the award of the contract, resulting in suspension of work for audit, leaving the projects at the mercy of the weather. Experts put progress of work on the Fomena project at about 80% complete. It has 26 wards, 2 operating theaters, recovery units, accident center, outpatient department, maternity wards, staff accommodation, among others. When completed, it will serve communities in the Adansi North where residents struggle to access health care. Samuel Okain is managing director of Solan Construction, subcontractor on the project.
It's not much of a defect. There are few installations which we might say that yes, they are deteriorated. But at the end of the day, the contractor have factored everything into before coming back to site.
Do you have a timeline for completion?
Yes. As chairman said, the government has issued a 90 days to do what? Finish this project. Yes. The contractor have also put in, or bear in mind that within the 90 days, we have to what? Double up what we are doing. So we are going to increase the number of manpower on site. And then we have to increase the man hour on site in order to be able to achieve. But we have to consider natural occurrence where we look at the field work, where we have to complete the road. Rain, we are in the rainy season. Okay, so we have all these factors. But I say yes, indeed. If government has issued 90 days, the contractor has to work with the stipulated time.
Okay. So let's touch a very important milestone in the life of the ongoing.
Well, we apologize for the loss of sound in the last insert. We'll rectify it and possibly bring you a replay. But moving on, 164 contacts traced from 3 positive cases, mostly resident in the Kajabi district of the T region, are willing to do the mandatory wearing of nose masks to the executive instrument 61. Most residents either keep the masks under their chin or in their bags. It is business as usual with very little to be desired for social distancing. The police would have to step in on market days for a good number to wear their masks. Correspondent Peter Senu has more in the following report.
Apart from the very few people who wear the nose masks, the larger majority do not put them on. Their main claim is that they suffocate when they wear one. Others would rush to put the mask on upon seeing the camera around them. It takes the police to enforce the wearing of the nose mask in the district. It is a market day, but not much of a busy one due to market restrictions by the district assembly. But why are the traders not in their nose masks as prescribed? Vida Amanu speaks for the market leadership. As for education, we do it on a daily basis. Some complain about the heat when they put the mask on. For others, it is sheer negligence. We cannot force them to put the mask on. It is in this regard that some groups and individuals in the district are supporting the fight against COVID-19 in the district. First is the Asatu community, where the local COVID-19 management committee has distributed over 2,000 nose masks and other PPEs to residents, including motorbike riders who ply their trade to the area. Professor Anthony Kruger led the presentation.
On behalf of the local committee of the COVID-19 at Asatu, we are presenting these nose and mouth masks and then gallons of soap, liquid soap, and Veronica buckets to the community, Asatu community, as a way of helping to fight the pandemic, the coronavirus disease.
Also is a chief of Asatu, Odaifo Yebiashe Amponsan Ajiman, who presented some PPEs worth 15,000 Ghana cedis to the district police command to stem the fight against COVID-19 in the area.
I'm very, very, very happy to see my colleague, Inspector from headquarters, donating these items to Kajabi Police Command. Inspector, we thank you very much and we're grateful. On behalf of my colleagues working with me at the headquarters and all the police in the Kajabi Police District, we say thank you.
Peter Senu for Joy News.
In other news, General Overseer of the International Central Gospel Church, Pastor Mensa Otabil, has cautioned churches against rushing to gather together in assemblies as coronavirus cases in Ghana are on the increase. His comment delivered during the ICGC online service on Sunday comes after heads of the Christian ecumenical bodies in Ghana sent a 6-pointer proposal to government spelling out modalities for which they could safely perform their programs in auditoriums. He says churches have a role to play in protecting society and urge endurance with current arrangements, even though they are uncomfortable.
Well, as you know, our world is going through some interesting days. The last few months from January, especially for us in Ghana from the month of March, has been extraordinary months as we have sought to mitigate the effect of this rampaging virus that is attacking men and women indiscriminately all over the world. And just when we thought in Ghana that we were having a control over the situation, we are beginning to realize that the virus has a mind of its own and doesn't seem to correspond to some of the efforts we are making. So looks like things are getting a little uncomfortable for all of us. Definitely it also means that this is not a time for churches to consider gathering together in assemblies because the crisis before us is not going down, and it's important that as churches we play our role in protecting society, which is made up of our members and we ourselves as pastors as part of the society, and we trust that we will endure the arrangement as it is now. It may seem uncomfortable, it may not seem suitable to us, but that is the price we pay. That is the price we pay for making the world a better place. And I trust that each one of us will be patient and wait till we can safely gather, not gather and martial law, but safely gather and safely worship and have fellowship together as a church. And I trust that day will come very quickly, but if it tarries, we will wait for that day so that we can gather together as God's people, not in an atmosphere of uncertainty, but in an atmosphere of certainty, of faith, and of trust in the Lord. This virus is wreaking a lot of damage.
Your superstation, Joy 99.7 FM, supported by Starbuys Food and Drink, served some 25 lucky mothers and their families dinner at home. to commemorate Mother's Day. Now, this was on the sidelines of an on-air show dubbed Joy FM Pampers Mama at Home. The show, which was hosted by Jackie Ankra, had gospel musicians Obapa Christie, Celestine Donko, and Kwesi Oting performing live. Spoken word poet Nana Asase and lyrical appreciator Emmanuel Boache Yadom also glorified the existence of mothers by way of poetry. We'll bring you some highlights.
She gives beyond demand, keeping the Lord's command, be fruitful and multiply. That is how the world still stands, fuller with people than with sand. You might not understand, but in the beginning, God created earth. He created the womb, He created the tomb, He created woman, He created mother, and made man from the dust. Birth, keeping the past in the tomb and lending life to the future from the womb. So mother has been at work till now. Let her rest today so we celebrate her miracles.
Yes, thank you, my mother, and thank all mothers out there who are impacting their children with the word and with good deeds. Because and you know, Obi a friend or baby a bami. Because Oya Kolakra and Chibina Maonso, Yabe from Mama. Mama, I appreciate all the things you do for me. I thank you. I thank you.
Say maternally mine, memorably measured, meritoriously magnanimous, miraculously made. Say originally ordained, obviously open-handed, ornately organized, observably oiled. Say tailored talent, tantalizing taste, tenderly truthful, thoughtfully tolerant, thoroughly trained. Say hierarchically high, heartily humane, hastily here, honorably halcyon. Say efficiently eclectic, enchantedly enabling, ennobling effervescence, exegesis elucidating exemplary excellence. Say rare remnant, radiant relic, rhythmic rhapsody, wrestling raffia.
We're doing this one together.
Well, that's it for the latest news update, but we have more news as we look at what stories are occupying the front, center spreads and the back pages of the various dailies we have in the studio. Myself, Mama Vioso Abwadi, Evans Mensah and Israel Lai were up next on the bill. Well, so we have to do the interaction as we review the newspapers, and Mama V is here. We'll be joined by Evans Mensah and then also Israel Lai. And Mama V, good morning to you.
Hi there. Good morning to you, Roland. How are you?
I'm good.
Great.
Good.
Great. Well.
And as and when we have Israel and Evans on stream, we'll let them into the review. But Mama V, you want to start? I hope that you had a great weekend. Let me ask you. You sound a bit laid back or lethargic this morning. I think you need some coffee.
Aha, that would do. That would do.
To prep
it would change everything. Absolutely.
I think so.
Some dry one.
Yeah.
So let's start the newspapers. Hopefully you're doing good as well. And if you stayed up to listen to the president's address, or, well, if you made time to watch the news this morning, then you know that ban on gatherings not lifted. So keep doing the things that you've been doing. And if you haven't taken any of the protocols seriously, well, the numbers are still rising. And you have to begin to take them seriously so we can have our normal lives back. All right, let's do the newspapers. I'll start off with the Finder, Roland. The Finder newspaper on the front page Plight of mothers in COVID-19, pragmatic interventions needed to further their cause. That's a call by the First Lady, Rebecca Ekufuado. Also, government did not share different macroeconomic data with IMF, according to the Finance Ministry. Don't lift ban on social and public gatherings. That's the Ghana Medical Association issuing a statement even before the President's address. Ghana's confirmed cases of COVID-19. Well, paper is late because it says 4,263. Obviously, the address was a bit late. Newspapers couldn't capture it. But, you know, we've gone up to 47. Okay, let's continue with the Ghanaian Times. Apologies, we're not able to show the newspapers on the screen this morning, but we're trying to work on that. So the Ghanaian Times newspaper says, new Manche introduced to traditional council. Don't lift ban on social gathering, GMA to government. Let's fix problems on new TACRA report system. That's a call by the freight forwarders. On COVID-19, cases confirmed in Accra police cell. Zoom Lion disinfects, cleans police facilities. We will touch a bit on that and give you some details, but let's turn attention to the back page of the paper. It has the details of that story on the disinfection of police installations reaching the central region. Also, Chihine gives to vulnerable in Achim Abuakwa. That's it for the Ghanaian Times. So we've done the Finder, the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Let's see. Let's follow that up with the Daily Dispatch. So on the front page of the Daily Dispatch, battle for MPs, Ablekuma not slot. Sheila Batel's likely to benefit from father's goodwill. So picture of father and daughter, Kwamina Batel's and daughter Sheila on the front page of the paper. Down memory lane, what Captain retired Kojechi Kata submitted to the National Reconciliation Commission, the NRC. Boache Jako cautions MPP about the dangers of handpicking parliamentary candidates. And on COVID-19, recent increase of 921 cases, a factory in Tema with 1,300 workers had 533 confirmed positive. And that's the Daily Dispatch front page. The Daily Statesman now, Kabila to CPP members disregard unruly Akwete's call for CC meeting. Hard work will win us December polls. Mark Menwo explains MPP's 3M's 2020 campaign. Well, he's been retained as a 2020 campaign manager for the party. Heritage and Stabilization Funds, not Mahama's idea. NPP exposes more NDC lies. And the last paper, before Roland runs us through what he has, is the Ghanaian Observer, and on the front page, Alote suspension saga, Mosquito upset with Mahama and Ampofo. Sounds like it's a question because it's got a question mark with it. Baumia, others ready with NPP 2020 manifesto, according to NPP chief scribe. Group demands apology from Mahama, from John Mahama over false African press freedom ranking claim. And on One District, One Factory, Gexim chases $100 million credit to fund more factories. Yeah, that's it for the Ghanaian Observer, Roland.
Yeah, definitely. Now let's start with for my batch of newspapers that I have. Or let's see, I have Daily Guide, so I'll start with the Daily Guide. It has on the front page, IMF bounces NDC, clears government over false data, and we know that this should be called for Newsfile, definitely. If you listen consistently or thoroughly to Newsfile over the weekend, you will get what the IMF position is, because the whole of last week was repleted with a lot of argument, because Fact Check Ghana put out a statement or its own opinion about what sort of data the Finance Ministry of our Republic gave the IMF and Parliament subsequently. And this also generated debates and a form part of the discussions, not only on Joy FM, but also radio on Joy News and the rest of the multimedia platforms, and indeed the entire media over the period of last week. So would want to do that. And it says COVID-19 attacks police cells is also on the front page of the Daily Guide. So we have it here. And then also 80 million Ghana cedi bail for coup doctor, 7 others. Now, this is quite an interesting story, and we all have been following this story in court. COVID-19 climbs high to 2,200. It should be 2,700, because at the time that it went to press, many of the dailies went to press, the address had not been released. 4,700 the number is not, but we have here on the front page of the Daily Guide 4,263. Robert steal 600,000 bullion van. This is a very bizarre story, but it happened, I believe, in the Bono area, and the story is on page 3 of the paper. And robbers on Friday evening attacked and robbed at gunpoint a bullion van carrying an unspecified amount of money from Techiman to Sunyang. And it's why we have to invite into the review Evan Spencer, and then also Israel I. Good morning to you, the two of you.
Hello, good morning, Roland and Mama V.
Yeah. Hi there.
Hey.
Yeah,
how you guys doing?
We're good. We're good. We hope that you slept well, woke up early as well. I'm not sure.
Oh, I mean, you could bet I haven't slept well. I mean, after watching the president and staying up that late, you say the Nadu pe and I don't come on. I mean, you get to stay up a bit longer. So yeah, I mean, Echo woke me up this morning, I must confess.
I know,
but
right?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to join you.
Yeah, true. And your voice sounds croaky, so it speaks to the related conversation you're talking about, not sleeping early. But for a newsman, it's normal, Israel. Not sleeping early, but waking up early.
Hi, Izzy.
Okay, so we'll stay with Evans. When Israel comes in, and then we'll also invite him onto the Zoom. And we've been looking at a number of the newspapers and the stories. And look, Mamavi, can you take Evans through the ones you looked on the front page?
I'm sure he's already familiar with what the newspapers are reporting. So Roland is just going to go through the rest of the papers, and then you gentlemen will have a pick. Let's see the issues on your heart this morning that you want to highlight on. So, Roland?
Okay, so I do the Custodian. The Custodian has on the front page, Mahama to speak on £3 billion Airbus bribery scandal. And then the story talks on page 3 about the flag bearer of the NDC, former president, said to be rolling up his sleeves to face an apparent battle to extricate himself, as the weather the story used, from the £3 billion Airbus bribery and fine scandal that hit Ghana and other countries. An appointee of the former president, Mr. Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa, dropped the hint on a TV program over the weekend. But on page 2, the two of you out there, Israel as well as Evans, the GMA has issued a red alert on COVID-19. And we also do know what the content of that red alert is. Again, they were encouraging the president, if not appealing to the president, not to lift the restrictions. He did just that. I think significantly that will be it for me. But we all know the stories that are dominating the front pages. And so we'll have a pick, and we'll see how it goes.
Sure.
Hi, Izzy. Finally, we get to hear your voice. Good morning to you.
Yeah. Good morning to you guys.
Yeah, Israel.
Perhaps we can start with the president's address. I'm not sure everybody stayed up like we did to listen to him.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit of what he said, highlights of that of the statement, guys.
Okay, so I did, yeah, and what jumped out at me has to do with some inconsistencies regarding backlogs. And I don't know if that issue has come up yet, but the president was saying that the cases, the 921 that we had, which saw the case count jump to 4,012, had to do with a backlog. But we heard Professor Ampofo of Noguchi on Tuesday, just last Tuesday, saying that they had cleared the backlog. Noguchi had no backlog, and that the backlog that they had to do with KCCR, which was 1,982, I believe. And so if you have 1,982 samples, I'm trying to, I find it hard to understand how come the president is talking about a backlog that goes back as far back as April.
Evans.
I mean, that's an interesting point. But for me, of course, I mean, going into the president's address last night, the talk in town was a fear that the president was going to lift the restrictions. And we've seen GMA issue a statement. We've seen Occupy Ghana issue a statement, all of them warning the president against lifting the restriction. In the end, the president kept the restrictions. But something he also did, which had come in for some criticism before, was that instead of us seeing the real numbers reflect on the Ghana Health Service page, he gives us an update we didn't have before in terms of the numbers, which is 4,700 cases.
Yeah.
I mean, and the last time when Intiasari was on my show, I was asking him, I mean, if you have these cases and you wanted to reflect on a daily basis, why don't you simply just update it on the website that we could all see in real time? Because when you see the numbers that the president gave, some of them go as back as Friday and Thursday into Saturday, and then there was a latest on Sunday. I mean, so we could have had this reflected in real time on the page. Then you could see, we can all track and follow in terms of how we are doing. Remember that this peak conversation is coming back, right? I mean, whether we've peaked, people say this is like a second and third peak. You know, it's become the butt of jokes on Twitter, because really, if we peaked on the 25th of April, they say, you look at the numbers and people begin to doubt whether we really peaked. I mean, so it really isn't helping the narrative at all.
Yeah, true. It's actually also reflected because most of the newspapers, almost all the newspapers missed it actually. They're quoting the previous number, which is also still on the Ghana Health Service website.
Yeah. Yes,
and to top it up, I think that I'll go on the tangent that Israel has just started with. And I think that the president clearly, based on that announcement yesterday, is putting in our minds some level of uncertainty regarding the numbers. So we have 533 people who apparently tested positive in a factory in Tema. And we do know that if you look at the demographics of people who work in factories, because I lived in Ashaiman, I grew up in the Tema area, they usually live in the ghettos, the communities where we have a lot of clusters, etc. Now, how many days had they been infected going to work still before we did the discoveries? How many people have they infected? For example, many of them, if they run shifts, will buy food at night. Many of them will interact with their families, etc. Now, if somebody bought food at night, how do you go and trace the person that they bought the food from? Even more so, other patrons of that food seller. And I feel that if you look at the situation in Germany, where this morning we're told that they lifted the lockdown, but they are seeing a trickle in of the number of cases. In Korea, the city of Seoul, in a Itaewon area, for example, one person went to a nightclub and infected 40 people just in a night. So we need to be told, well, we're testing more, and so we're getting more numbers. What about those that haven't been tested? How many more positives are we going to get?
So still lots of questions following the revelation of the 4,700. Properly so, Roland is worried about the possible people that this factory workers alone may have infected. Very relevant questions coming up today following that revelation.
Especially when the president actually said that the 533 people were infected by one person.
That's strange. That's strange. Any other pick that we can get? Because we have a lot of our children at home not going to school. And for me, it's a concern for the parents. They are supposed to be paying school fees depending on which school they are going this week and the next week. So they are doing online studies. The internet is not consistent unless you have a broadband. Not all parents can afford.
Well, but even that, I mean, you're not home and the light goes off, which it does often.
Yeah.
So
it's a concern for many parents as well. So I'm hoping that we can come back to the table with some better solutions as to how.
No, I mean, and Roland, the president for the first time told us that he is working on the roadmap I mean, he'll be announcing shortly, in his words, a roadmap to reopening the economy and lifting the restrictions. I mean, I'm really eager to see what this roadmap looks like. And you're right to mention the German example. I mean, yesterday we read a story about how Germany, since lifting the restriction, has seen a rise in their infections. And so, I mean, he's really caught between a rock and a hard place, because the restrictions, he said yesterday emphatically, that it cannot remain with us forever. It has to change at some point. The question is, do we have the science and the data that allows us to make that decision in a way that is backed by real science and data? Because if you look at the data that they share with us, I have a challenge with it. I mean, I woke up this morning, I'm still seeing 4,200 on the page. The president has talked about 4,700 last night, and we are still struggling with, okay, if you don't do your daily cases, you can't plot your graph properly. I mean, it's still a challenge. I don't see what's the challenge between what the president says and how it reflects in terms of the data. That is a big question going forward. And Roland's concern could come to pass. Without the data, you can't make those hard decisions.
I'd like to go back to the case of the 533 workers in the factory in Tema. And Roland, the question you raised, which has to do with how many more people these people have infected, considering the fact that they may be coming from communities that are quite densely populated. And see, especially when we're looking at like a backlog. My issue, and one issue that people have been raising all this while, has to do with what happens to people whose samples have been taken. If your sample has been taken, ideally, you're supposed to self-quarantine, stay away from everybody else. But if you happen to have these people who are in communities who can't necessarily be in one room with the rest of their family, so maybe there are 4 of them in one room, and you say they should self-quarantine, how is that possible? And if they're not self-quarantining, then it means that they're most likely to be interacting with other people. They're going to pick their truck for public transport and get to work. And in their communities, they're using the same bathrooms with everybody else. And so that, for me, presents a real challenge. So we're talking about 533 people, but really, if you're going to do the contact tracing, it actually becomes a challenge. So what people have been pushing for a while now is, why don't we make it possible for people whose samples are taken and who can't self-quarantine, and tell these people, or find a place for these people? And the people are making reference to the schools. There are schools that, you know, are closed at the moment. Can we send them to those schools and keep them there until they get their results, so that when they get their results, we can isolate them? Because until then, it means that people's samples are taken and they're mixing and interacting and mingling with everybody else, which is a problem.
All right, guys, stay with us. Let's see if we can do myjournline.com, find out what MyJournline is reporting. You can have a say on some of the stories before we wrap up and make way for sports. So here we go with what MyJournline is reporting this morning. Of course, we have the updates of the case counts rising to 4,700. Ban on public gatherings extended until May 31st. And if you missed the president's speech, you can play back. Just visit myjournline.com. Also, we are ready to contain the virus should ban on public gatherings be lifted. Now, this was Sam Korankye-Ankrah on Beyond the Lockdown with MFR POW. Last night. Also, political detractors making government effort to COVID-19 fight look bad for their survival, according to the president. Ken Takiteko Churu II outdoored as new Gamanche. UCC cautions lecturers against conducting exams. Continuous assessment online. So this is what MyJournline is reporting. Guys, are churches ready to contain the virus? Should the ban?
Well, I mean, that's a difficult one. I mean, so for me, my concern is it's not the big recognized churches like, you know, Sam Korankye-Ankrah's church that I have a concern with. Once you say churches can come back to gathering, it is these small, hard to control churches spread and dotted across the country where my real concern is. I mean, because those ones, as we've seen, even when the law had been passed to control gathering, we've seen it in places like Kumasi, where a pastor consistently had to be arrested and eventually tried and prosecuted for breaking the law. That for me is the risk. It's like opening a Pandora's box if we are let this loose at the wrong time in the church.
Yeah, and you see, I actually agree with Evans. It's a problem. But I actually feel that you can, lift the restrictions and ask people to go to church. But I doubt if people are actually eager to go to church at this point, because people are being extremely careful. And yes, you would find some people who, I would say, a bit gullible, and they wouldn't mind, and they would just troop into the churches because they believe that they will get some healing. And so I would urge the religious leaders, the clergy, to they should just relax and let's be convinced. Let's get to the point where we know that things are fine. And if things are fine and we found way around a lot of these challenges that we're having, then we can go back to gathering in the congregation. For now, let's stay in our homes and pray to God. I mean, the Lord is going to listen to us, and let's come together. Let's fellowship as families. And even that is actually good. You're having some, family bonding and family time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mama, just quickly, there's another story on my journal. I think it's interesting. UCC cautions lecturers against conducting exams, continuous assessment online. I think it's a very interesting story, because we all know schools are trying to grapple with what to do if you're going to write exams. The story says management of the University of Cape Coast has cautioned its lecturers against conducting any form of assessment tests, whether quizzes, assignments, or examinations online. He asked that according to the management, online academic work is restricted to lectures and tutorials. Therefore, any other form of activity aside from aforementioned will be non-scoring. I think that is very interesting. In other words, I mean, they are so asking that the exams be held in a classroom where you sit with other people. That is a very dangerous position. And I wonder what is wrong with having an exam online, by the way. I mean, I don't know what you guys think about it.
Well, I'm thinking institutions of higher learning need to be innovative. Even before coronavirus came or was detected in November in China, we all do know that there were a lot of online learning actions that were ongoing. People were in Ghana, going to school in Ukraine, in the UK, etc. They call it distance learning. You have, if it's a Welsh university, you still have the certificate as a Welsh university certificate. And I think that they have to be innovative and stay within the time and try to move along it, because after coronavirus, things are going to change. I don't know what Mamavi thinks. Things will definitely change.
Well, I mean, it sounds like they have an idea when this whole ban on gathering will be lifted. So it's almost like continue the usual teaching online, and then when the ban is lifted, you go back and sit in the classroom and write the exam. That's totally wrong, I think, because this whole extension does something to the calendar itself, the academic calendar, and you can't be pushing exam till when?
Israel, what's your
I feel that they also should hold on, or they should find innovative ways of going about it. I mean, I suspect the challenges, they haven't really set up their systems to hold or conduct these online examinations, and that's why they really don't want to go down that path. But the one story that I'm interested in, that I like to bring up, has to do with King Takite Kochu, the second outdoored as
no wonder. My
Are you related to him?
It's got to be real quick, though.
Okay, so first of all, there have been issues about social distancing and why this is happening. You know, we had the Ukapehene being installed, and that became an issue, and this is also happening. But beyond that, I'm hoping that we're not going to, this will be the end of the challenges we've been having, the disputes we've been having as with regards to who is actually the government chair.
Yeah.
So is this the government chair?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
so they claim. We'll see.
I'm thinking if there's going to be any dispute or fights among the parties, Charlie, Israel, you're a guy. You come from Osu, don't you? So, Charlie, straight away we
settle the score, and Evans too. Okay,
known in private life as Israelite.
Just before we run up, we want to tell our listeners that you guys going forward are a part of our show, so they'll be seeing more of you and hearing more of you. Your thoughts on issues dominating the headlines. So, well, thank you, guys.
It's been enjoyable. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, same here.
Mama V.
All right, stay with us. We've got sports coming your way. Still, the English Premier League, you know, what's the way forward? Still a lot of conversations around it. Is it Brighton, a player getting infected with the coronavirus just when the conversation about opening up and playing the game, you know, just got everybody excited. So stay with us. Benedict comes up next with details of this and plenty more in the world of sports.
Hi there, my name is Benedict Tosu. Welcome to the sports segment here on AM Show. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Well, a lot to talk about this morning here on the sports segment. And we'll start here on the local scene. And Black Stars coach CK Akono has received a lot of endorsements from the ex-players since he was announced as coach of the Black Stars. Well, the latest to speak on his appointment is former Black Stars player Lai Kingston, who is now coach at Right to Dream Academy, and he insists CK is the right man for the job.
Yeah, with CK, for me, I played under him, and also I worked with him for one game in Tamale when the naming of
the renaming of the stadium to Aliu Muhammad Sports Stadium.
I was his assistant that took the Southern Sector national team players. I work with him. So with him, it's someone that looking at him, if worked under Right to Dream as well. So right to Dream, for me, I think Right to Dream developed him a little bit. Now, when I started working with Right to, that's when I realized where he's got, because before I was coaching, my durations in training and everything is a little bit high. But he told me, I remember that day, he told me that, okay, he told me durations, he told me my durations is too
limited or short?
No, too long.
Too long, okay.
Too long, you should do it very short. He was the one, and when I went to Right to Dream too, that's when one of the key things I came to my mind that, oh, CK have told me already. And also the way his relationship with players is amazing. So for me, I think he have what it takes to, and you can see, As of Folk was very short, but when you can see when he went to Kotoko, he was doing very, very, very well with Kotoko before he had his problems with them. So for me, I think it's a very good choice. He's played as a player before. He's played in the national team as well. He's captained the national team, so he will understand very well the players very well. In his position now, he's a coach. He will understand the players very, very well because he's been in their shoes before. So he know at a certain point he will know how the players are feeling, and he will know the right things that the players will need and the country need. So with me, I will be very happy to see Ghana giving him a longer term. He have a 2 years contract with the national team. At least he is building a team. We should have patience with our coaches. Give them time.
So Lai Kingston was on the Joy Sports Link on Saturday, and he also added his voice to the recent comments made by Kevin Prince Boateng on a possible return to the Black Stars. According to Lai, that decision should be left for Coach CK Akono.
Oh yeah, he's still a Ghanaian, and you know, I heard, I watched one of his interviews. He still have so much respect for the country. Even though things happened when he was playing for the national team and all that, a lot of people, most people would think, oh, he have no respect for Ghana and all that, but he's still a Ghanaian, and listening to him, for me, I think he have so much. You know, he believed that Ghana had given him a lot of opportunities, bigger platforms and all that. Ghana helped him to enjoy, to smell the World Cup, which every player, which he believed in his interview, he said that with him, he realized that there is no way he can play for the German national team. So he made a very good decision in playing for Ghana. So for him, I think if the coach still believes that he still have something to help him, and he's playing very well in his team, he's still a Ghanaian. The national team is for every Ghanaian that is performing well. But one thing I want to know, I want to see players in the national team, players that are performing well in their clubs, players that are doing well week in, week out in their players to be.
Well, there will be more on Larry Kingston in our subsequent sports bulletin.
Well, in exploring Accra, we also do know that it has a great connection to other scenes as well as sight and sound across the rest of the regions beyond Greater Accra. And talking about the whole country, we also do know that we are under restrictions, and this has been extended by the President in his latest address, as was broadcast live to Ghanaians, what the restrictions and the time period, the close of the month. But if you have any comment in relation to the President's speech, make sure that you touch base with us. We'll put our numbers, that's our WhatsApp platform and our Facebook, Twitter handle, as well as all relevant social media platforms right on your screens. In the meantime, we have to talk about many related factors because, you know, the comments or the announcement by the President and the content of his speech brought to home what needs to be done by the ordinary Ghanaian to make sure that we complement the efforts of states. And the wearing of face masks, as well as using hand sanitizers, and in the absence of that, making sure that we wash our hands consistently and running water with soap, have become even more paramount in these times. But look, let's go back to the President. Get an insert. We'll get on to stream, get onto the phone lines and speak to some significant persons, experts working on the front line on this pandemic.
Wednesday, 6th May, a total of 135,902 tests had been conducted, with our country's total number of confirmed cases standing at the time at 3,091, with 303 recoveries and, sadly, 18 deaths. On Thursday, 7th May, 14,046 more tests were conducted, and this included the clearing of the last set of backlogs. Our total confirmed cases then rose to 4,012 positives, i.e. 921 new cases. Our recoveries stood at 323, 8 persons were critically ill, and death still at 18. It is important to stress that 533 out of the 921 new cases recorded between last Wednesday and Thursday are factory workers from a fish processing factory located in Tema. All 533 persons were infected by one person. Again, let me reiterate that these new 921 cases were from backlogs dating as far back as 26th April and not necessarily over a 24-hour window. The coming on stream of 7 more testing facilities across the country to complement the efforts of the Noguchi Research Institute, the Kumasi Center for Collaborative Research, and the National Public Health Reference Laboratory at the Korle Bu Teaching Hospital have meant that we have been able to clear all the backlog of tests, and the reporting on the cases of infections since Friday, 8th May, is now current. On Friday, a total of 5,253 tests were conducted, with 251 positives. On Saturday, 2,255 tests were conducted, with 266 found to be positive. For today, Sunday, a total of 3,045 tests have been done, with 160 testing positive. These relatively lower daily numbers of infections are welcome and reinforces the fact that the measures instituted to help reduce person-to-person contact and help defeat the pandemic are working. So, as of today, Sunday, 10th May, the country has conducted a total of 160,501 tests, with our total number of infections standing at 4,700, with 494 recoveries, 5 persons being critically ill, and 4,179 persons responding to treatment. 22 persons, virtually all of them with underlying illnesses such as hypertension, diabetes, and chronic liver disease, have unhappily died. We must understand that the more people we test for the virus, the more persons we will discover as positive, and thus have the opportunity to isolate and treat them. If you do not test people for the virus, you will not find the persons who are positive, let alone isolate them from the population and treat them and prevent them from spreading the virus.
And it brings to home what the related conversation should be, because all these content, as delivered in the president's speech, raise a lot of questions on the minds of many ordinary Ghanaians. But Mama V, we have more questions to ask.
Yes, we do. Fortunately, we have somebody who can help us answer some of the questions. We'll try and touch base with other experts, if you like, people with good knowledge on this subject. But let's start over the head of the ICU and member of the National Response Team, Dr. Chris Owu, who's at the UGMC, on the line. Hello, Doc, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Mama V and Roland, and good morning to your audience. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Hopefully you've had a very good weekend.
It's been a working weekend. As you can see, I'm not actually at UGMC yet, just preparing to go join my colleagues after a meeting with other members of the case management coordinating team. So it's been a working weekend.
All right, good. So for people like you on the front line, I guess an extension, as the president announced last night, will be welcome news.
Yes, it is. We know that there's been a lot of discussion as to what the president was going to say, and then what the implication of that is to patients that we're managing and people who may be infected in the communities and those who will be at risk. So yes, it is welcomed. I want to stress that we're all still getting to know a lot more, irrespective of what we already know about this virus and how it is, especially in the community. So any respite we get from increasing the number of people who are infected would be welcomed. There's still quite a lot of work to be done in the community, especially when majority of the people are asymptomatic or have no symptoms, to make sure that we break the spread of this virus here.
Yesterday, the president also announced a rise in the figures, the case counts, and indicated over 500 coming from a particular spot. As a member of the National Response Team, what can you tell us about that incident? And there are a lot of fears, honestly, because if one person can infect over 500, then we're not safe.
All right, so the pillar responsible in the COVID management for detection of people in the community is mainly actually with respect to surveillance. We work quite closely with them. And it is, yes, it is worrisome when you have a cluster like that happening. But that basically emphasizes what we've always said about this virus. that its ability to infect people is quite high. Yes, we know that majority of people who get infected may not have symptoms, but any one person who gets severe symptoms or dies is a significant one person. So it's so very easy to infect, and that's why we, as I said earlier on, it is a welcome respite while we contain fully this in our community. Basically, in factories, you know how the work goes. I don't want to believe that the factory didn't have any measures put in place to try to minimize spread between their workers. So it means that even in spite of some of those measures, the hand hygiene measures, the masking, that when you have people clustered together, very close by, working together, that the risk of infecting each other, if one person gets it, is high. Again, it also emphasizes the fact that we need to be continue to emphasize that the measures that we have mentioned, or the directive that the President and the Ministry of Health has put out there, are not for sometimes. They are for basically any time that you are exposed. So you can wash your hands 3 times a day, but that one time you touch a door handle or a doorknob without washing your hand could be the time you infected yourself or infected somebody. You could wear a mask, but if you keep pulling it down, if you keep touching the face of that mask and touching your face, or you keep letting it slide down, as we see a lot of people do sometimes, then you actually put yourself and other people at risk. So this, for me, is actually something that emphasizes that the directives need to be done, but not only done, but we need to also emphasize on doing them well. It's not, it's real. It's real. To have almost half the population of one factory affected by one or a couple of people is significant.
You know, when I was discussing this with Roland a bit earlier, he was talking about the contact tracing for the people that these people may have come into contact with. And he was looking at typically for factory workers like that, the possible places they may be coming from. And I'm thinking that this may be even greater work for those who be doing the contacts.
It is true. It is a lot of work. And that's why I said it's been a working weekend, not only for those of us in case management, but all the other pillars of COVID-19 management, public health, surveillance, basically those who do the contact tracing, and then those who have to make the policy. And make sure that these policies are implemented, monitored and evaluated. So it is a big job. Anytime you have one person infected, it means that depending on how long ago that person was infected, there are multiples or exponential number of people who could have come in contact, and therefore tracing them all backwards to try to get where they are. In situations of factory where maybe the people are working and living in the same community or housed together, that is a little bit easier, because if you can actually trace easily all the people that have been in contact, then you can actually isolate and treat and keep monitoring. But that is not the same for other scenarios where you have people coming from different places, using different modes of transportation, coming to work and going back to their families, going to visit friends, especially when we are not in a lockdown. Because then you have to actually depend on the person's ability to remember, as well as being able to locate real-time those people that have come to contact with them. And as long as that takes longer, it means that the virus keeps getting spread or transmitted from one person to the other. And that is worrisome. So we're quite happy that the ban on gathering, the closure of the ports, airport, land ports, our borders is extended for a little bit more time to give us opportunity to contain this. Because if you take with respect other modes of gathering, that is a lot more difficult to trace back. There are loads of people coming to church from different places. If you have to trace back from a church that obviously it would be a lot more difficult, if you get what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
And I'm here, Chris. So I'll take the next 2 rounds of questions. And I'm looking at the case count for the regions. Greater Accra in excess of over 3,000. Where are they? Where are they in Greater Accra? Or let's say in Accra and Tema. Where are they?
Yeah, I mean, when you have community spread, you will have cases in the community. The idea is to, as much as possible, identify the people who are positive and then isolate them, and which is what we are quite aggressively doing at the moment as part of case management. But it means that depending on how soon those results came, that sometimes even after you have identified those who are positive and moved them, that you still have a lot more people to identify, test, and treat. Now, that was part of the reason why we probably had a bit of delay in our earlier labs when we had enhanced testing, because of the glut of numbers that was coming to the labs with its capacity at that point. So it meant that their capacity was a bit stretched. We're happy that the capacities have been significantly increased and other labs have been brought on board to reduce the delay happening. Because if I pick a person who is positive by testing today, I can't say that that person got infected today. I can't, if I did a test today and get the result in 1 week and it is positive, the person would have had opportunity to infect other people in that 1 week before I even identify and then isolate that person. So laboratory diagnostics is an extremely important pillar in all this, making sure that we get a timeless result so that we can identify and isolate. Again, stigma in the community is playing a very bad role in all this, because if people are afraid of being stigmatized, then even when we know that they are positive, sometimes it can be difficult identifying them. We know that there are people who have switched off the phone, there are people who have been called, and then when they get there, there's been sometimes resistance in the community. Again, there are people who still do not believe that this virus is real, and that the lab test is helpful in identifying and controlling this. So yes, we have a good number of them in treatment centers, those that you already know of: East Municipal Hospital, University of Ghana Medical Center, the teaching hospital, the Greater Accra Regional Hospital, Tema, for Greater Accra, and then a few in other places of isolation and facilities. Thankfully, we had the coming on stream of the Pentecost Convention Center, where we have isolated a good number of those who are not with symptoms while we observe and then treat or translocate them if become necessary. But yes, there is still quite a good number that in the community that are still being identified and then isolated. And that is the way to go. It is not an easy task. It's not an easy task by any stretch. Our address system has not always been easy to identify and pick people up. But the national security, other security agencies have been extremely helpful in helping us identify those people and move them to places where they can be isolated, retested, and treated here.
So it means that we have nobody who has tested positive and is at home.
There are people in the community. I mean, it's an ongoing activity. I mean, when you pick up a number, the numbers that we're picking, they are in scattered places. You can't get them all out in a day. It takes some work. It's a bit different from those who are from a factory, where almost all of them are identifiable easily, where they can all be moved, or those from one institution, be it health institution or any other institution. But when you have a community spread, the work of even going to identify whether the person is still residing where he was when the test was done can be quite tedious. And that is why it is important that we we have some respite in containing the spread. Yes, there will definitely still be people in the community, in their homes. There will be people who have moved to other places because of stigma and the fact that they've been told that they're positive. There are a lot of education, and I'm happy with the information on NCCE, assisting NCCE to scale up the education in the community. There are other groups, both governmental and non-governmental, that are trying to do a lot of work on the psychosocial aspect and trying to bring down the stigma, because you can get people who you can identify where they are, but if people are making conscious effort not to be identified, it is a lot more difficult to do to get them to isolate them.
I was trying to ask, those that we've identified and tested positive, are any of them in the communities? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so yeah, Roland, that's what I'm saying, that there definitely are people in the community, because they're not because we decided to leave them in the community. We have a policy of basically not doing home care at the moment. So if the question is, are we caring for people at home after they've tested positive, that is not our policy at the moment. We are identifying, isolating, monitoring, and treating those people. Now, you can only isolate somebody that you've gotten hold of. So yes, there are people who are still resistant in the community from being identified. There are people in communities where there's been a bit of difficulty getting through. There are other communities that have been fantastic in helping where they are community leaders, and that is where the role of community leaders, traditional leaders, is extremely important. A number of communities, they are opinion leaders, they are traditional leaders, they are political leaders, have been helpful in educating their people and then helping to make sure that people understand the need to isolate and monitor and retest and treat these people. And in those communities, we are making a very good headway. But as I said earlier on, Roland, this does not happen in a day or in a week, especially when, as I said again earlier on, the virus keeps spreading until you are contained. But there's a lot of work going into containing the virus in our communities, yes.
We've heard how all the people, Dr. Owoh, all the persons who have unfortunately died have had some underlying issues. Are we still on that same, tangent, if you like? Have all died because basically they've had some underlying issues?
All right. So thank you, Mama V. Yes, we've always known that there are factors that contribute to how severe your illness will be. Yes, there is also, again, a lot we still do not know about this virus, but we know quite a lot about how it behaves, what it does to your body, what it makes your body do to itself by fighting itself, in an attempt to fight the virus. Now, those chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, asthma, heart disease are strongly related to not just severity, but also the risk of dying from the virus. But it does not mean that that is the only reason people will die. There are people who may not have comorbid condition, but who may, nutritional-wise, immune system-wise, have been suppressed, or who, for example, somebody who has not been well recently. Our body defense mechanism works in a way that it tries to defend us against any invaders. Now, to be able to do that, your own immune system needs to also be up to the task, even if you do not have those chronic conditions. Because what those chronic conditions do actually is try to reduce your ability to defend yourself. But people of older age, significantly people above the age of 60, 65, I mean, in other places we talk about people above the age of 70, people who have diabetes, because these are things that reduce your immune system, people who have hypertension, people who have sickle cell, they have an excess risk, or what we call an extra risk factor.
So basically in Ghana, basically in Ghana, all the persons who have died have had some issues already. Is it because the virus was detected a bit late, so that even if I have an underlying condition, I have diabetes, for instance, but I detect, or it is detected that I have COVID-19 early, my rate of survival will be high?
All right. Thank you again. Again, let me just say that there are people who have died even before we realized that they were positive, because they were very ill when they came to hospitals. Some of them, by the time we detected, part of the reason that the test was done is because they were so severely ill. And for us, people who are severely ill, for which we cannot find a good reason why they are that ill, we recommend testing for COVID-19 virus. Now, some of them, by the time the result came, because they were really ill, were already dead. Now, for those who ended up in ICU and who died in ICU, yes, all of them had other condition risk factors that contributed to that. But not all of them were old. We've had people who were a bit younger, in their 50s and in their 40s. So, and again, some of them who were severely ill in ICU, who have survived and gone home, did not even know that they had some of those medical conditions. So diabetes in Ghana, hypertension in Ghana is quite common. It's not rare. And it's not only the elderly who have diabetes, hypertension. There are people who have been diagnosed with diabetes and hypertension because during this, so it's difficult to even say, oh, okay, because you have that, you should stay far away from the patient, from everybody. Yeah, so it's a bit difficult, but yes, those who have that. But then again, let me say that part of the reason people were also presenting late is the stigma. There are people who have found out that they have symptoms, and because they know that these symptoms are similar to the symptoms of COVID-19, they have stayed at home, hopeful that they will be among the majority that we say that may not die from it, and then do not tell anybody because they don't want to be stigmatized.
So is it stigma from, Doc, sorry, is it stigma from their immediate environment, or stigma from the hospital or the people who come and take the samples?
There's a lot of stigma in our community, and I think everybody has been talking about that recently, a way of dealing with it. People, we have as well. I mean, people have fears. And there's nothing wrong with being scared. There's nothing wrong with being afraid. But being afraid means that you are cautious. You are careful with what you do. But sometimes fear translates negatively to stigma, where people do not only not want to be associated with these people, but also the way that we talk about it, the way we relate to them, even after people have recovered. Community rejection of people who are fully recovered. Okay, Dr.
Owo, can I bring something to your attention? Because we're talking about stigma. I've heard some people say when they call, and you're part of the national response team, the way the vehicle, the ambulance will come with a siren, I mean, everybody in the community would immediately know that there's something happening. Is there a way that we can manage it, any differently from the way we've been doing it?
Thank you again. I think a lot has gone into that recently. There are a lot more discreetness as to how people are picked up by the national security. There is a lot more discreetness as to how people are returned back to their communities. It's a balancing act. It's a balancing act, especially when there are difficulties in getting access to communities. You have to be identifiable. I mean, you can't just walk into somebody's house and say that I am this so person, and therefore come with me because I'm going to send you to isolation, and the person will agree. So people have to be able to identify who they are and the authority that they have to execute their responsibilities. Yes, when that is exaggerated, it can actually create panic, it can create fear, and we are aware of that. Okay. And that, therefore, there is a lot of balancing. Again, when you're returning people back to their homes when they have recovered, there are instances where people halfway do not want to go back to their homes, and therefore you need to be careful that you do not also leave people halfway. So it has to be.
Is there an alternative if somebody doesn't? Is there an alternative if somebody doesn't immediately want to go back to their homes?
We've had people who have said to us when they have recovered that I am not too sure I want to go back home because of what I've heard from others that have gone back home with respect to stigma. What we have is we're working a lot with the clinical psychologists and psychiatrists. We're working with their national association and their bodies. And then, of course, this non-governmental bodies and other institutions that work on this. Because,
so you must go home when you recover.
We can't keep them forever. We need that space to also be able to isolate other people. So again, it comes back to the balance. If you send them and they are rejected from their community, it may mean that we have to go pick them up and then house them. But remember that they have recovered, and you don't want to keep them exposed, continue to be exposed to the virus.
I've got a last question for you, Dr. Owu. Sorry. Yeah. How many doctors, nurses, first responders have been infected with COVID-19?
And how many of them have you tested?
All right. So, first of all, I don't have the answer to both questions because yes, we coordinate what happens nationally, and then we try to get information. So that information is actually continuously being put together. But yes, the job we do is a high-risk job. We understand that. We signed up for that job. We try to protect ourselves. That is why you keep hearing us talking about PPEs, personal protective equipment. So we do not. It is not that we do not know that irrespective of what we do, that there will be health professionals that may get infected. We understand that. What we try to do is, as much as possible, reduce that to the minimum and make sure that anybody who does get infected is treated. We have measures that we put in place in our treatment center and certainly in basically all health institutions to try to also look at how do we pick early health professionals who get infected. But because, again, we work together. So if one person gets infected, it's at risk of infecting other people. So in a number of the our health facilities, people will check their temperature, or somebody checks your temperature when you come in and log that in, and when you go out, and somebody records any symptoms that you have. So there is a questionnaire to find out whether you have any symptoms, and we keep re-educating even ourselves that it is important, it is to our interest, it is to our family's interest and our colleagues' interest to report any symptoms that we show at any point in time. It may mean that we quarantine you for a period of 2 weeks, and we will test you if you have symptoms, and at the end of that 2 weeks, before you go back to work with others. So no, we don't just have a blanket recommendation to test every health worker. Again, that will create a glut in the laboratory systems and affect what we do. But we are quite aggressive in isolating or quarantining and testing health workers that show signs of symptoms or who have been in significant contact without appropriate protection with those who have been found to be positive.
Okay. So I have a senior medical nurse who had a positive patient in her accident emergency ward. Now, she has not been tested, and she will go home, and the family will still be in doubt whether she's okay, because she and her colleagues in that ward had been nursing that person for the last 5 days. Because when the first sample was taken of that patient for that test, it had to take about 5, 6, 7 days for the result to come. At that time, they in shift were treating the patient. And the patient,
not knowing
and the patient hadn't come into contact directly or traveled, etc., but had come into contact with her grandchildren, her children, etc., in a house, in a congested community.
Yeah. Okay. So Roland, thank you. It's difficult to speak to isolated incidents especially if we're not aware of them. But yes, there have been incidents where patients have been found to be positive after people have nursed them for a period of time. And therefore, those people become contacts. We've had significantly a number of our facilities, health facilities, which where portions have been closed down while staff have been quarantined. I'm sure you that of a couple of the hospitals in Accra recently. And this is because we have a rapid response team in every facility, in every district, in every municipality, in every region. And there are means of reporting incidents and people respond to them. Now, it is difficult if the incident is not appropriately reported to act all the way from national. So, for example, Greater Accra Regional Health Directorate would have the handle of mostly what happens in Greater Accra, although we work collaboratively with them, and other regions the same. Now, again, let me say that the fact that a patient is picked positive does not mean that we necessarily have to test everybody immediately. And there's a reason for that, and that is the science of all this discussion about the virus.
Not even the doctors and the nurses, the nurse is taking care of this person?
Yes. So that's what I'm just explaining, the science behind all this.
Okay.
Now, if I am nursing a patient who is COVID positive, let's say I started nursing a patient yesterday or today, and then I find out that the patient is positive, and you go and test me now, I most probably will be negative because you've not given me enough time to actually have that virus incubate itself in me and be transmissible.
That's even more dangerous.
No, so if you test me immediately, then it may be negative. So that is why the decision is usual to quarantine those group of health workers. So you would have heard, again, in all the ones that have been reported, that they were quarantined. They were kept away from their family.
Okay, Dr. Owo, not to cut you, I'm just following the explanation. So I've got a quick question there. So immediately you won't test me, but can I pass it on? Can I get somebody infected? Can I reinfect?
You may be able to get somebody infected, but if you have had it on for, let's say, a number of days, long enough for it to incubate and be able to transmit. So that is why you want to keep that person away from others, and that's the quarantine.
Okay, again, so it incubates before it transmits, is that it?
Yeah, so the virus gets into you, immediately it gets into you. If somebody unfortunately coughs to your face who is positive for COVID right now, and coughs into your face, and you think that you've been exposed because you're not wearing a mask, and therefore you go to test right now, you'll be negative. You'll be negative because it has not had enough time to get into your system and come out through the...
Wait. The person got exposed and then coughed in the face of somebody. The person just got exposed and coughed in the face of somebody. In real time.
I was actually going to, Roland, hang on. I was, Dr. Owo, hopefully your connection is stable. I was going to use that same scenario. So the person coughed into me, but I test negative. But if I coughed into Roland directly, would I be infecting him?
Immediately.
No, you will not be. Okay. You will not be infecting Roland, okay? Because you haven't even been, you don't even have COVID at that point in time, in quotes. But then it does not mean that you will not eventually have COVID, because it will now pass through your system, it will get into your bloodstream, it will come out through your respiratory secretions, And that's when you are able to infect other people. Now, during that period of time, you may show symptoms, you may not show symptoms. If you do not show symptoms and we allow you to go back to your family, what that may do is basically that you're not showing symptoms, but you're able to transmit to other people and you contaminate them. But if we quarantine you and you start showing symptoms, we will test you. If you do not show symptoms, after a period of time, usually 2 weeks, because we know that the average length of time...
But Doc, what if that person is asymptomatic?
Yes, exactly what I mean by not showing symptoms.
Yes, but
so
you're not testing.
Yes, so we're not testing you if you do not show symptoms, but we will test you before we release you back.
Okay.
And by that time, we would have given you enough time to have the virus go through your system per our protocols. So anybody who is quarantined, any health worker that is quarantined, at terminal quarantine, the terminal part of your quarantine, you will be tested. You only go back to work or go back to your community and family if you're negative, meaning that you did not, although you were exposed, you did not contract the virus.
Are you testing for negative twice in this instance?
If you were negative on your first test.
No, because you haven't even tested this person. So you only isolated.
No, so we are not testing for negative twice in such a situation because we're not talking about recovery. We are trying to determine whether you are infected or not.
Okay.
So after that 2 weeks, you're just going to be tested once. You'll be quarantined. So if you were positive, you would have shown it. So we will not test you twice. That would be once.
Okay, I have a last question. Mama V says you're exhausted, so we should let you go. The president in his speech, and this got even medical doctors on my old school page arguing because it's logic. He says that we're getting more cases because we're doing more testing. So it means that we'll get more cases. And going by the numbers that he reiterated were the positives that were recorded since the last case count before his address, it means that we're likely continuously going to get more cases as we do more tests.
All right, so Roland, if you have community spread, and community spread means that there will still, even when we say that we have significantly gotten out of this, there will still be a few people who will still be passing it on until totally it disappears. Now, when you have community spread, the more you test, the more you detect those who are infected. If we decide to not test anybody in Ghana today, we will not pick a single positive. It does not mean that there are nobody who is infected. So yes, if you have a very vigorous, aggressive mode of testing, a lot of people, the more you test, the more you pick those who are infected. But those are people who are infected. It's not like it is the test that is transmitting to infection, if you get what I mean. The less you test, if you have a lot of people infected in the community, you will not pick them up. So it is important to test. It is important because if you can test, then you can pick those who are infected. You can isolate them. You can monitor them. You can treat those who require to be treated. Okay. So yes, it is true that the more you test, the more you will detect if there are. Of course, irrespective of how much we test, eventually, if we have eventually totally contained this infection, and there are not people who are spreading it because we have moved or isolated those who are positive, we would start seeing very tiny numbers or nobody infected, nobody positive, purely because the infection is not in the community at that point in time.
All right.
But then the only way we can tell is by testing, but with testing, we need to be aggressively isolating and monitoring and treating. And that means that we need to have cooperation in the community. We need to have people understanding that it is necessary to contain this. We need to have people following the directives that have been put out there. Yeah.
All right. Dr. Chris Owoh, we thank you for your time, but how many people do you have in your ICU in terms of patients?
So I can, this morning I can speak to basically the two ICUs that I'm directly looking after. There are and about 3 of them there now. But I can't give you fully national because we would get that later.
All right. Thank you for your time. Well, thank you really for your time, and we wish you the best even as you set off to go to work. Thanks to you and your team. That's head of the ICU and member of the National Response Team with the UGMC, Severe and Critical Cases. So there you have it. That's the updates that we have. Hopefully we've asked all the questions on your mind as well. We've got another conversation coming your way right here on the show. Stay with us all through and send us your comments.
Well, on the back of conversations around coronavirus, how, well, we may have it because of community infection in areas or the environment in which we live, we also need to look at the general state of transparency-related issues, governance in our country. And look, KPMG, you know, they are one of the leading in the world accounting and auditing firms, and they have compiled their reports that is indicating that whistleblowing apparently is not a thing that many organizations seem to encourage. And also, on the part of workers, they don't seem to come forward to report instances of anomalies, graft, etc. in the organizations. And generally, that also reflects in our society. So we decided to have a broadened conversation on the subject. We're having on stream a partner and head of advisory, KPMG Ghana, right here. And then Adam Sananu, who we know is a regular on the show, contributes significantly on issues of anti-corruption. And both of them are streaming into the studio. Good morning to you, Andy and Adam. Well, great. Can you all hear me?
Can you hear me?
Okay, great.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I don't have Andy. Andy, can you hear me? Well, we'll rectify that as quickly as possible. I think he can hear me, I can hear him, so we'll see how it goes. But if you take a look at the report, I have to. Andy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Roland. Good morning.
Through the report, what really are the findings in that report? First, what was the rationale, and then subsequently what you found out? Just summaries of it for us.
Thank you very much. The report was essentially a summary of survey findings we commissioned late last year to understand how organizations and businesses in general employ whistleblowing as part of their control systems. Now, we did this because we have been in the business of supporting various companies to deepen their corporate governance and ethical cultures by making available whistleblowing independent, objective hotlines for the benefit of their clients as well as other stakeholders. And having perceived this as adding so much value, we were keen to understand how the general citizenry or the market also works with the whistleblowing facility. Now, the finding from our report was quite surprising to the extent that quite a significant number of organizations did not have any whistleblowing channels available to them in case they wanted to bring up any matter for consideration of management or other bodies. And therefore, our interest was to actually understand why organizations don't have the whistleblowing facility there, and two, even if they had it, why it is not being effectively used. This comes in the context of the fact that most of our institutions are struggling to improve on their corporate governance agenda. We all witnessed the issues in the banking sector, which the central bank laid largely on the doorsteps of corporate governance or weak corporate governance structures. Since then, the central bank has moved to put in place a raft of corporate governance directives, including recommending that there is ethical codes of conduct developed, but that is where they stop short. We believe that they should move on and, just as prescribed by international practice, also have whistleblowing facilities in place in order to promote the culture of transparency and accountability in their institutions, and thereby build strong and better and resilient organizations for the economy. So that is the rationale, and that is how those were some of the key findings also from the report.
There was a section of the report which was indicating that for the employees that you engaged, only 95% actually had used the hotlines and actually activated their own position of going to whistleblow or report cases. Now, how is that a reflection of our socio-cultural thinking or norms or the way we live in our society?
That's a very good question. And indeed, when we did launch the report last week with the Commissioner of the Human Rights and Administrative Justice, Commissioner Whittle, the Auditor General, Deputy Auditor General, and the Executive Director of Ghana Integrity Initiative, Lindo Foripapo, it was evidently clear that there was consensus that lack of trust, fear of retribution, victimization contributed to people's unwillingness actually to use whistleblowing channels. We have a Whistleblowers Act, but the interesting thing was that Commissioner Whittle, in his welcome or keynote address, was quite clear that we need to go beyond the act and ensure that we put in place the regulations that would ensure that companies and other bodies actually bring out the institutional structure that will facilitate the use of whistleblowing in our markets and in our cultural settings. I mean, Ghanaians, as we are, typically we don't want to, as it were, snitch on our colleagues and so on when they misconduct themselves. But these are also the very reasons why we are not able to build very strong competitive businesses for our economy. And it is our position in KPMG that we move beyond the rhetoric and the act and ensure that we actually have a regime that insists or even promotes whistleblowing and accountability and transparency. I mean, if you go back to the year 2002, the United States government, through the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, actually enjoined directors and boards to actually make sure that they put in place whistleblowing lines and tax audit committees to make sure that these lines, where possible, are even confidential and anonymous in order to promote more whistleblowing and encourage more people to come forward. We are here and we haven't really looked at this valuable tool, even though we are beginning to see a sense that a number of institutions are finding it very important to do so. The Auditor General, for example, has launched the Citizens Eye portal or app, which allows people to inform them about certain acts of misconduct and wrongdoing. Just about a month ago, I cited the Ghana Revenue Authority also taking a full-page ad in the newspapers, encouraging people to step forward and let them know what is, if there are any people flouting the law. So increasingly we recognize it, but we believe we should move beyond that and get regulators, especially for public interest entities, to ensure that they put in place whistleblowing lines. We know that it's not the panacea to all issues within corporates, but we believe that used together with other control systems will improve the governance structures and environment within our businesses, make them more resilient and competitive in order to be able to build a stronger economy.
Mr. Adam-Senan, what do you make of all this? KPMG commissioning this and subsequently hoping that it will trickle down and have a certain reflection or impact on corporate Ghana per se?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would like to commend KPMG because it certainly adds a significant amount of knowledge that contributes to our anti-graft efforts in this country. I think part of the challenge is the speed with which we are able to embrace such new information and make the policy changes that will allow us to see accelerated benefits. And so looking at this particular report where it is clear that a whistleblower's line that is made available to the external public provides more information on what is going on and which is wrong, and enables institutions to therefore then investigate and plug whichever loopholes. It's a key finding that I wish would be made more publicly known. And so kudos to Joy News for highlighting this. The question is, how do we make sure that other entities take this on board? I find a bit of this, it's curious to find that respondents were saying that they lack trust in systems. That was a 20% or so. And then you had a 50% saying that they responded, 51%, they told their managers about the various fraud and other actions that were going on that they found wrong. It seems to me that where the reports were done, there was trust in the institutional arrangements in terms of who was the person, who was the immediate boss. So the whistleblowing line is obviously something that we can take advantage of, making sure that institutions provide these lines available at large to external parties. But it also means that institutions must make sure that the management level have the kind of personalities who are open and willing and, as it were, assure their staff and subordinates that they can report without being victimized, etc. The question on why they do not trust the system, maybe a little more detail on why they do not trust the system, may have unpacked this issue as well.
No report, 59%. Okay.
Sorry, we are not hearing you. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we take a look at unethical behaviors, 59% of them, nepotism and favoritism, appropriation practices. Okay. And then
we can't hear you.
Can you
hear? It drops and then comes back. Can you ask your question again?
Okay. So we are 59% observing unethical issues but not reporting to management or the hotlines that have been made available or the channels. Now, these unethical issues are nepotism, favoritism, discrimination, theft and misappropriation of assets, and illegal business practices and bribery, among many others. The quantum of business, it is always with the state. Since we're only dealing with organizations, how does this relate or translate to doing business with state, Ms. Adam Sanano? Or how can we relate and translate this to doing business with state or public institutions?
Well, I missed part of the question, but I assume you are asking that, looking at the various types of fraudulent activities, how within the organizations, how does that relate to the work they do with state? Is that right? Hello? I mean, if the organizations that were assessed include public entities, what it means is that those activities impact on the various services that the state provides to individuals. The quality of that service is impacted by if people are stealing the assets of the entity and those assets are no longer available to provide good services. It means that if resources are lost, those resources are not available to improve or enhance the service delivery. And so, absolutely, all those categories of fraudulent activity, of corruption, impact on the quality of service that the entity provides, impacts the public, and is of interest to all of us.
Now, Ms.
Roland, if I may add a bit to the question that you posed. See, one of the key reasons why a number of people lack trust in whistleblowing channels was because they felt that blowing the whistle, no action will be taken on what the matters that they raised. And indeed, the Commissioner of Human Rights and Administrative Justice, in his remarks, did indicate, for example, that the whole institutional framework where, for example, the Attorney General's office to do with the public sector is the institutional host of taking action on whistleblowing matters is also problematic because they themselves, in their experience, investigate probably between 30 to 40 matters and send them to the Attorney General's office annually. But they hardly get any feedback or see any action. Why? Because the Attorney General's office itself is overburdened with other matters that are more, they may consider more serious, So there is therefore the call for an independent, objective, perhaps anti-corruption or anti-bribery or anti-wrongdoing institutions, such as the Office of the Special Prosecutor, to actually be the hosts of these matters, to engender more activity and action, and thereby also build more trust in the system. And those were the recommendations coming from the SHRAJ.
Now, we have to mainstream these broader conversations in relation to how perhaps that also influenced the way we behave. Mr. Edem-Senano, where do we have to begin the conscientization and the behavioral change?
Well, I think that the recommendations need to be put together and potentially maybe brought to the attention of Parliament on one hand, but also, like he pointed out, the regulations that enforce some of the laws that already exist, whether it's the Whistleblowers Act, need to be looked at. And those regulations can be looked at in the context of this particular report. So that if you're going to do the regulations for the Whistleblowers Act, you take on board the recommendations of the KPMG report to make sure that those regulations are tight enough to insist that institutions should have a line that is extended, especially public institutions, which of course are the bulk of what we are talking about here. They should have that line available to the public, because we know that many more people who are colluding with internal persons will then report, and then we can have the information to act on and save the nation resources. So 3 areas: education for the public in general, that, look, the 5% who did report, there were actions within 3 months, and these actions were positive, and so the fears may not be required. Indeed, that non-reporting thing and the reasons given reflect some of the reports we've seen at the national level, that by CDD, etc. So it's not surprising. It looks like it's part of our subculture. But we need to get people to understand that that we are afraid of the system. Really, there's evidence to show that when you report, actions are taken. And then beyond the education, get the regulations put in place. The Attorney General's department needs to take the lead in that. And let's also get Parliament thinking through what other legislation will ensure that we can help ourselves to bring the change we want to see.
And where should the change also begin from, Ms. Akoto?
Well, first of all, I believe, like Edem has recommended, we need to revisit the Whistleblowers Act to make sure that we tighten most of its provisions in order to give more bites to the application of the Act. That is number 1. Then number 2, we believe our regulators should also be up and doing. If, as a nation, we want to build competitive businesses, we don't have to wait for the Enrons, for the Welcomes, for the Arthur Andersons to hit our body corporates before we react. We must be proactive. And I believe that if our regulators from the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Ghana Stock Exchange, the central bank are all up and doing, insisting that, making available whistleblowing channels and lines will improve on corporate governance, then we'll be on our way to really upping up the game and improving on corporate culture as far as whistleblowing and ethics are concerned.
Well, we'll see how it goes. But it also means that perhaps we need to do a further assessment in the coming year to see whether there's a further improvement. Anything on the cards, KPMG, Mr. Akoto?
Yes, I mean, we will continue to watch this space and also do our bit to continue to advocate and with the various regulators to ensure that we see a change in this space. Because just even beyond the whistleblowing, KPMG has been at the forefront of, for example, doing studies on our corporate governance regimes and mechanisms, and have time and again come out with recommendations on how, through a very, very strong corporate governance and ethical culture, we can build resilient and stronger companies that can also compete on the international stage. I always make the case that, for me, Ghana as a nation can begin to build a stronger and competitive economy when we see our companies being able to operate beyond our borders and actually going into other territories. I mean, in this country, we find companies from other jurisdictions operating here. We have companies from South Africa, Europe, Nigeria, banks, all operating here. And that's because they have taken steps to build and strengthen their corporate governance cultures, to give the confidence to their businesses to also enter into other markets, knowing very well that they are well covered with the homegrown regulations that ensure ethical culture, accountable culture, and governance in order to make their businesses resilient and capable of surviving in these territories. We don't see much of Ghanaian businesses operating in other countries, and that is a question that we should ask. It's all down to improving on ethics, transparency, and governance cultures through mechanisms like whistleblowing, and therefore our remit will be to continue to advocate and do what we can in order to improve on the governance and ethical climate within our businesses.
And Mr. Senano, the last question. We see it, for example, if it's the multinationals, they have the homegrown anti-corruption whistleblowing mechanisms, and then there are punitive or sanctionable actions subsequently, even if the actions may have taken place. Now, we also seem to be having big organizations that are turning international, even if it's only the sub-region they operate in. How do we encourage them to adopt these, per se, not to mention names?
Well, I think that Mr. Akoto has outlined what is actually necessary. The question is, do we have a regulatory body that is focused on this? At the moment, we have scattered entities with some responsibilities regarding these issues. Bringing it together and ensuring that we have a particular fulcrum whose eye is on these matters, because it's a strategic decision we are taking to make sure that our private sector has the capacity to go beyond Ghana. It's crucial. In the past, I've heard the, Auditor General, or was it Attorney General, asking for the capacity to engage lawyers from the private sector to take up the excess cases they cannot handle. We need new systems and mechanisms to be able to have an eye to enforce these things. So one is making sure that we have our own national standards that people can look at and know that they are responsible, obligated to enforce, and to have the institution in place that looks at this as a focus area. Otherwise, we will still have this discussion. And I'm sure that next year, if Andy did the same assessment, we'll come back and be disappointed in ourselves. So let's advocate strongly that instead of having it scattered across disparate entities, how can we bring it together under the attention of one entity? How can we have national standards in these areas of ethical and corporate governance concerns? And how can we ensure that when we come back to it, there's a reference point, an entity we can hold accountable? We know that as a people, without enforcement, we don't seem to be able to make much practice. So we need that kind of focus. That would be my recommendation.
Well, thank you very much, Andy Akoto with KPMG. And then also Edem Senanu, we all know he's an anti-corruption campaigner. And, well, it's all because KPMG did a survey and subsequently on whistleblowing in organizations and whether employees are willing to use appropriate channels for them to report incidences. And look, the report was abysmal because of inherent virtues that we have in us. But what does it mean? How can we broaden the discussion further? And it's good that we had Mr. Akoto and Mr. Senanu helping us do discussion. We're hoping that in our homes, subsequently in our offices, especially in these times, we will also get to have a broader discussion on all this about how we need to start from the home, the young people we have, and subsequently, maybe the next generation things will change. But we have to bring you the story of a 12-year-old Aisha Fofana who has developed a portable hand-washing device just from a knowledge of air pressure system she learned in science at school. Watch the story. It's quite interesting.
I'm Aisha Haria Fofana. I'm 12 years old and I attend Headlights Educational Center. I want to become an engineer in future, because like I have strengths such as I'm good in creativity and art, especially drawing and mostly thinking and all.
Aisha's mom is surprised her basic school daughter has an idea to fight COVID-19, applying air pressure experiment skill to produce the device. Aisha needed only these two bottles, one for water and the other for liquid soap. It is just 1.5 liter of water and soap. It took her less than 2 days to come up with the idea after observing many people struggle to wash their hands.
I gave it a day to think about it before I tried it. So it took me about some 2 days. So one day was for thinking of how to do this and what. And then the other day I just tried it and I saw it worked and I was so excited. I was just
Aisha says once she realized the experiment will work, she became delighted and did not know how to celebrate.
I was so excited. My mom was so proud of me. Everyone was so proud of me. And they were all giving me encouragement and to give me some ideas of how I could spread this to the world.
The 12-year-old has always thought of doing something to make the world better.
I just saw many people doing their stuff and I was like, I have to also do something for my community. My people really need something and I didn't want something to make so expensive, which you have to get a lot of money. I wanted to make something simple and easy that takes no electricity or solar or anything. So I decided to come up with this. Due to the lack of air pressure, there's no water coming out. But as soon as you open it, the water comes out. Same applies to the straw. The water will come out from the straw, so it's easy for you to wash your hand. As soon as you open it, the liquid soap comes out from the straw. But when it's a bit empty, but if it's full or half full, it will be easier for the liquid soap to come out. And it comes out. No, sometimes I just think of something. I just make a guess of something, then I think of it before I just try. Then if it works, I just do it. So, I just thought of a while because our teacher taught us about air and pressure and everything. So I was thinking that if air can give pressure, it will also give pressure for the water to come out. So I was thinking that if I do this, I'm sure that it will happen because...
Aisha's desire to be an engineer in future drives her passion to achieve the best.
It was easy. I just saw many people doing their stuff, and I was like, I have to do something for my community. My people really need something, and I didn't want something to make so expensive, which like you have to get a lot of money. I wanted to make something simple and easy that takes no electricity or solar or anything. So I decided to come up with this.
Her parents say they have already noticed their daughter's promising future and celebrate her for the innovation they find economical that can benefit the nation.
Then you just start it into our baby, and you take another tissue and you clean your hands.
A report by Mahmoud.
So that's Mahmoud Nuruddin's report now. Let's get in touch with Aisha, who joins us live now via Zoom. Aisha, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Good to see you in person. And congratulations, you're very creative. I like your invention.
Thanks very much.
So how did you even get to form an idea like that?
Well, as you know, like sometimes I can just be thinking of something and all of a sudden it just comes to mind. So it's like very soon, or maybe I can just think of something, then I try it out on paper, I draw it because like I really love drawing. So sometimes I'll just think of something, and I'll just draw it. So when I draw it, I'll try to do it. I'll try it 2 or 3 times. So when I see it works, then I take it out open.
Nice. So what are some of the things that came into your mind that you decided to draw, even though you haven't really developed them yet?
Well, sometimes I always thought of drawing mini cars or like robots, and just stuff to help us do like something that will help us do some things, like sometimes for sweeping, mopping, because like sometimes I really need help or sometimes I'm really lonely, so I just try to make something up. So I just draw it, so I just keep it there. So in case I get the materials, I can just make it up.
Okay. Now you talked about the mopping idea. It means that you do things at home? Do you help your mom?
Yeah, I help a lot.
Okay. So your motivation comes from the things around you, the everyday things that you see. And then you're just thinking we could do it even easier with some type of invention.
Yeah, of course. Like for example, the vacuum cleaner is easier than the broom we use. You can just use it simply, but it requires electricity. So it's easy to use and it's not much stressful.
So the hand washing machine, it means you went through the same process. You drew it on paper and then you decided to get the materials. Hello, Aisha? Oh, and we have a freeze on that feed, but we're not done with her yet. We still want to hear her talk about that invention that you see on the screen. 12-year-old Aisha, who's developed a portable hand washing device from her knowledge of air pressure. Now, that's a very curious case. I wouldn't have thought about that in 100 years. So there are still a lot more things that we want to find out from her. Let's see, do we have Aisha back? Unfortunately, we don't. We're going to take a breather. We'll bring you show business. Yeah, we're not.
Serious.
No, I mean, that's what it is. That's why she has to come and teach us.
Because they're 12 years, but they were all general level, no, you're high.
I don't know.
High IQ.
I think I'm even fascinated about the way she even speaks and carries herself, like with a lot of maturity. She's coming from a deep place, I can sense.
Very deep.
Yeah.
I'm sure that even her family sometimes, they just stay in awe.
I want her as a friend. So we will get Aisha back. Let's just take a breather and do, oh, Aisha is back. Aisha, apologies there. I lost you.
Okay, that's okay.
So I was asking about the processes that you went through to get this device out.
Well, sometimes I can just go through stuff. So like sometimes I just think a while, then I try to get all the materials. Sometimes you can think of something, but it doesn't actually work. So I try it with a smaller material. So when he sees it works, then I try to make it with a bigger material or something that's even better than before.
Okay.
So it can be much easier for me.
So the hand washing device, did you try something before you finally came up with this one?
Oh, I tried it many times. I tried it with other stuff. Then sometimes when it doesn't work, I'll try with something smaller. Then something bigger. Then I'll try again and again until I get what I really want. So like, I don't quit easily.
Nice.
I always try and try again.
Okay, great. So how long did it take for you to finally come up with this one that we see?
Well, it didn't take so long because I already had an idea before the coronavirus. I already had the idea to just make something simple for us to wash our hands. I already had an idea, but when this virus came in, I knew that, yes, I can use this device of mine to help people. So that's when I tried to practice it. Like I did it at first just for fun. Then all of a sudden, when I saw that the pandemic came in, so I just decided to try it out. I had to try it many times before I got my results.
Fantastic. So what did your parents say about it?
Oh, my parents, they were so glad and everyone was happy about it. And they were like, oh, I've really done well. And they were all excited, especially my brother. They were all happy of me and they all wanted to support me, finding means and ways for me to share with my community because, as you know, most people don't like to wash their hands. And I want to lift the Ghana flag high to make Ghana proud. That's why I kept the Ghana flag on my device. Okay. Because some people think that Ghanaians, they are not capable of doing some stuff. But I wanted to make Ghana proud and I wanted to promote hand washing.
Great. So who, apart from your family members at home, because I see you have a setup at home, is somebody else trying your device? Are you making it available somewhere else?
Yeah, I've made many for my community, especially for my friends. They really like it. So I just made a lot. Now I have a lot and I'm even improving it. I'm finding means of ways to keep it on our school bags. I'm trying to improve it to make it better and easier.
How much does it cost you to make that for like a person, for an individual?
Well, it didn't cost me that much. As you can see, I just took some bottles, then some straw, then I bought some liquid soap, then I just found some paint and some paper, then I just painted this just for the decorations. So it didn't cost so much.
Okay, great. So if I ordered from you, how much would I be paying?
Well, I can make many for people, but it's not that much. So if you just want to inquire, you can call me or just get in contact with me, then I can tell you.
Oh, Aisha, I see you're doing business already. Are you thinking about making this a lot bigger than it is right now? Hello, Aisha? Oh, unfortunately, I can't complete that conversation. But we will certainly get Aisha back. If we don't today, we will grab her again tomorrow so we can finish up that conversation. There's something about her that's so fascinating. I want to talk to her for a very long time. So stay with us. Kadi comes up with some show business on the Monday morning, and we will be back to wrap up the show.